All right, we're going to have lots more coverage, of course, of the Winter Games going on in South Korea throughout the day. U.S. President Donald Trump targeting Canada again today, criticizing our country on trade amid the NAFTA renegotiations that are going on. Trump saying Canada treating the United States unfairly.
We lose a lot of money with Canada. Canada does not treat us right in terms of the farming and the crossing the borders. So they'll either treat us right or we'll just have to do business a little bit really differently. We cannot continue to be taken advantage of by other countries. We cannot continue to let people come into our country and rob us blind and charge us tremendous tariffs and taxes, and we charge them nothing. We cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow it to happen.
All right, let's take a look at what the president had to say and whether it actually adds up. Ian Lee is standing by. He's a business analyst joining us today from Ottawa. So, Donald Trump saying Canada treats us very unfairly. True or not true?
It's true, but it's also not true. And I'm not trying to sit on the fence. If you look at the tariffs, we are charging extraordinary tariffs on dairy products coming in from the States, 270%, when most products cross the border under NAFTA duty-free. Having said that, they also are nonetheless still exporting more to us than we export to them in terms of dairy products, notwithstanding that tariff. So, I mean, there's a sort of a nuance, Todd, to this story. But, I mean, the headline that he's using to appeal to his base, his supporters, is, look, they're charging this very high tariff. We're not charging it to them. Therefore, it's not fair. And that's what he's using to hit Canada over the head.
And when he says treating us unfairly at the borders as well, what did you make of that, Ian? Or was that kind of part of the whole farming thing?
Well, let me just back up before I answer the question, because people might be, well, what on earth is he getting so excited about, cows for? If you look at the 5 largest dairy states, 2 of them, and one is Wisconsin, which happens to be the home of Speaker Ryan, often called the 3rd most powerful position in the United States. That is the 2nd largest dairy state in the United States, 1.2 million dairy cows. Pennsylvania is number 5. Why are those 2 states so important? Because those 2 states, many think, put him in the White House along with Michigan. He only carried the White House by 77,000 votes in those 3 states. He absolutely must have Pennsylvania and Wisconsin vote for him in the next election if he has any hope of being reelected again. So now to answer your question, I thought that there was a veiled threat there to thicken the border, as it's called, slow down the border if we don't play ball.
And what is this reciprocal tax that he's talking about here? In other words, if you hit us, we're going to hit you back.
I think he's looking, and again, just to put more context on this, so that, because yes, Trump is pushing this very hard. He's very belligerent on this. But this is not something that's all, in the lonesome head of Donald Trump. This has been listed, the dairy irritant has been listed in every report for the last 20 years, going all the way back to the Clinton years, by the United States Trade Representative in his annual or her annual report to the U.S. Congress. So there's a long history there. And so that's this irritant is not something that just happened. And one more quick point, Todd. Vilsack, a former governor of Idaho, Vilsack, who was the agriculture minister for 9 years under Barack Obama, is now the head of the U.S. Dairy Exporters Association, and they are strongly supporting President Trump on his pushback against Canada on the dairy, the whole supply management. They want nothing less than the dismantling and the termination of Canadian supply management in the dairy industry.
So what does this mean bigger picture now as we move toward round 7 of the NAFTA renegotiations coming up in Mexico, Ian?
Right. I actually think, and I've made this argument before, I think dairy, paradoxically, even though the U.S. is a much bigger country than Canada, and dairy, I mean, there's 5 dairy states of real serious importance. Ironically and paradoxically, dairy is more important to Donald Trump than it is to us. There's only 9,000 dairy farmers left in Canada. There was once upon a time when we set up supply management, almost 150,000 in the early 70s when Pierre Trudeau set it up in his first administration. Now it's down to about 15 ridings in Canada, mostly in my area, Eastern Ontario and Quebec. And so the political hit is much smaller today to any government than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So I argue that it would be much easier for the Canadian government to compromise on this issue to get our larger strategic demands, which is access to the American market with a investor dispute mechanism.
Appreciate you getting into the studios today, Ian, to give us your take on this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Todd.
Ian Lee in Ottawa.